Jake had always been a creature of habit. Every morning at 6:30 his alarm would buzz, coffee at 6:45, out the door by 7:30 sharp. His small downtown apartment was organized exactly how he liked it, books arranged by color, kitchen supplies in perfect rows, and his bedroom sanctuary kept spotless and quiet. Living alone for the past 3 months had been paradise. No dirty dishes left in the sink, no loud music at midnight, no arguments about whose turn it was to buy groceries. After his last roommate moved out to get married, Jake had enjoyed every peaceful moment of having his own space. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Jake laced up his running shoes and headed out for his usual 5-mile jog through the city streets. The autumn air was crisp, and he felt good as he made his way through the familiar route. He waved to Mrs. Chen at the flower shop, dodged a few cyclists, and stopped to pet a friendly golden retriever whose owner he'd seen dozens of times before. When he climbed the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment an hour later, Jake was already planning his evening: a hot shower, leftover pasta from Sunday, and maybe an episode of that documentary series he'd been watching. Simple, predictable, perfect. He slid his key into the lock and pushed open the front door. Everything looked normal in the living room. His coffee table was exactly where he'd left it, with yesterday's newspaper still folded neatly on top. The kitchen looked untouched, but something felt different. There was a faint scent of vanilla in the air, and he could swear he heard movement coming from somewhere in the apartment. Jake kicked off his running shoes and walked down the short hallway toward his bedroom. The door, which he always kept closed, was wide open. Light spilled out into the hallway, and he could definitely hear someone moving around inside. His first thought was that he was being robbed. His heart started beating faster as he approached his bedroom doorway. He pulled out his phone, ready to call the police, and carefully peered around the corner. What he saw made him freeze completely. A woman was standing in his room, completely undressed, casually looking through the books on his shelf like she was browsing at a bookstore. She had long, dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and she moved with the kind of confidence that suggested she belonged there. She picked up his copy of a travel guide about Japan, flipped through a few pages, then set it back down exactly where she'd found it. Jake stood there for what felt like forever, his mouth hanging open. He blinked several times, thinking maybe he was seeing things after his run. Maybe the autumn air had been colder than he thought, and he was having some kind of weird hallucination, but no, she was definitely real, definitely in his bedroom, and definitely not wearing any clothes. The woman must have sensed someone watching her because she turned around. When she saw Jake standing in the doorway, her face broke into the brightest, most genuine smile he'd ever seen. She didn't scream. She didn't try to cover herself. She didn't look embarrassed or surprised at all. Instead, she walked over to him with her hand extended like they were meeting at a business conference. "You must be Jake," she said in a warm, friendly voice. "I'm Alex. I think we might have a little problem here." Jake stared at her outstretched hand for a moment, then slowly reached out to shake it. His brain was still trying to process what was happening. He managed to say. "Hi. I know this is probably really weird for you," Alex continued, still smiling, "but I think there's been some kind of mix-up with our room assignments." She walked over to his dresser and picked up what looked like a lease agreement. Jake hadn't noticed it there before. Alex held it up so he could see it. "I signed a lease yesterday for the master bedroom in apartment 4B, she said. "I paid first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. I even have keys." She jingled a set of keys that looked exactly like his. Jake's head was spinning. "But this is my room," he said slowly. "I've been living here for 3 months." "I believe you," Alex said. "And I'm really sorry about this. I can see all your stuff is here, and it's obvious you're settled in. But I also paid for this room, and I don't really have anywhere else to go tonight." She gestured around the space. "I mean, I love what you've done with the place. Very organized, very clean. Much better than my last apartment." Jake finally found his voice. "Could you maybe put some clothes on while we figure this out?" Alex laughed. "Of course. Sorry. I was just getting ready to take a shower when I heard you come in." I figured we should probably meet and talk about this situation first. She walked over to a large suitcase that Jake now noticed was sitting in the corner of his room. How had he missed that? She pulled out an oversized sweater and a pair of pants and quickly got dressed. There, she said. Better? Much better, Jake said, though he had to admit she looked just as confident in clothes as she had without them. So, Alex said, sitting down on the edge of his bed like she lived there, what do you think we should do about this? I tried calling the landlord, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. The property management office is closed until tomorrow morning. Jake sat down in his desk chair, still trying to process everything. This is insane, he said. How does something like this even happen? I have no idea, Alex said. But here we are. 2 people, 1 bedroom, and apparently 2 valid leases. She looked around the room again. You know, it's a pretty big room. And that's a queen-size bed. I'm just saying, we're both adults, and it's just for one night until we can sort this out tomorrow. Jake stared at her. Are you suggesting we share the room? I'm suggesting we both sleep somewhere comfortable tonight instead of one of us being miserable on that tiny couch in the living room, Alex said. Unless you have a better idea? Jake looked at his perfectly organized, peaceful bedroom that had somehow become the center of the most bizarre situation of his life. This morning, his biggest concern had been whether to have oatmeal or cereal for breakfast. Now he was trying to figure out how to share his bed with a complete stranger who had walked into his life wearing nothing but a smile. I need some coffee, he said finally. Alex grinned. Great idea, I'll make some. I brought really good beans. The coffee Alex made was incredible. Jake had to admit that as he sat across from her at his small kitchen table, watching her explain the situation with animated hand gestures and the kind of energy that made him feel tired just looking at her. So, I found this place on that apartment hunting website, Alex was saying, pulling up something on her phone. Posted 3 days ago. Great price. Available immediately. Master bedroom with private bathroom access. I called the number, talked to some guy named Mr. Peterson, met him yesterday morning, signed the papers and paid everything up front. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. Mr. Peterson? Short guy with a mustache, drives an old blue sedan? That's him, Alex said. You know him? He's my landlord too, Jake said slowly. He's the one who rented me this room 3 months ago. They stared at each other across the table. Alex's lease agreement was spread out between them next to Jake's own rental documents. Both papers looked completely legitimate. Both had the same apartment address. Both specified the master bedroom. Both were signed by the same Mr. Peterson with the same messy handwriting. This is unbelievable, Jake muttered, reading through Alex's lease for the 3rd time. How does someone accidentally rent the same room to 2 different people? Maybe it wasn't an accident, Alex said quietly. Maybe he needed the money fast and figured he could sort it out later. Jake looked up from the papers. You think he did this on purpose? I don't know, Alex said. But I've been trying to call him for the past 2 hours and his phone goes straight to a voicemail box that's full. The property management company's office phone just rings and rings. Jake felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. I tried calling him yesterday about my kitchen faucet, same thing. No answer. They sat in silence for a moment, both realizing they might be dealing with something bigger than just a simple mix-up. Well, Alex said finally, regardless of what Mr. Peterson is up to, we still have a problem to solve tonight. She stood up and walked back toward the bedroom. Jake followed her, watching as she surveyed the space like she was planning a military operation. It's a big room, she said thoughtfully, and that bed is definitely large enough for 2 people if we're civilized. About it, Alex, Jake started, but she held up a hand. Hear me out, she said. We're both adults. We're both in a weird situation that neither of us created. That couch in your living room is maybe 5 feet long and I'm 5'8". You're even taller than me. Jake looked at his couch through the bedroom doorway. She had a point. He'd fallen asleep on it once while watching TV, and he'd woken up with a crick in his neck that lasted 3 days. So what are you suggesting? He asked. Alex opened one of her suitcases and started pulling out pillows. Pillow wall, she said simply. Right down the middle of the bed, your side, my side, like we're kids at summer camp. Jake watched her arrange the pillows in a neat line down the center of his mattress. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious," Alex said. "Unless you have a better idea. Do you have a sleeping bag, a cot, an air mattress hidden somewhere?" Jake looked around his minimally furnished apartment. "No." "Then this is our best option," Alex said. "Trust me, I'm a very respectful roommate. I don't snore, I don't steal covers, and I don't take up more space than I'm supposed to." She paused and grinned at him. "Well, usually I don't take up more space than I'm supposed to." Despite everything, Jake found himself almost smiling. "This is the weirdest day of my life." "Mine too," Alex said. "And I once got stuck in an elevator for 6 hours with a guy who was convinced he was a time traveler from the year 2087. That sounds like a story." "It is," Alex said. "Maybe I'll tell you tomorrow if we survive tonight without killing each other." She continued setting up her side of the room, hanging a few clothes in the closet, and setting a small travel alarm clock on the nightstand. Jake noticed she was remarkably neat for someone who had just arrived. Everything had a place, and she seemed to instinctively understand his organizational system. "You know," he said slowly, "you're handling this whole situation remarkably well." Alex looked up from arranging her things. "What do you mean?" "I mean, most people would be freaking out right now, demanding I find somewhere else to sleep, calling the police. Something. Would any of that help our situation?" Alex asked. Jake thought about it. Probably not. "Then why waste energy on freaking out?" Alex said. "We'll figure it out tomorrow when we can actually reach someone who can fix this mess. Tonight, we just need to get through the next 8 hours without anyone ending up on the floor." She finished, arranging her pillows, and sat down on what was now apparently her side of the bed. "Besides," she added, "you seem like a decent person. Your apartment is clean. You offered to make me feel welcome even though I invaded your space, and you haven't once made me feel like this situation is my fault." Jake realized she was right. He hadn't blamed her for any of this. Maybe because it was so obviously not her fault. Maybe because she was handling everything with such grace that it was hard to be angry. "All right," he said finally. "Pillow wall it is, but I get the side closer to the bathroom." "Deal," Alex said, extending her hand again. "Roommates for one night." Jake shook her hand, wondering what he was getting himself into. Jake woke up at exactly 6:30, just like every other morning for the past 5 years. His internal clock was so reliable that he rarely needed his alarm. But this morning was different. This morning he was acutely aware that there was another person in his bed. The pillow wall had not held. Sometime during the night, Alex had sprawled across most of the mattress. One of her arms was draped over the pillow barrier, and her hair was spread across what had been his side of the bed. She was sleeping peacefully, completely unbothered by the fact that she had somehow claimed 3/4 of the sleeping space. Jake carefully extracted himself from the small corner where he'd spent the night and tiptoed toward the bathroom. In the mirror, he looked like someone who had slept scrunched up in a pretzel shape, which wasn't far from the truth. When he emerged from the bathroom 15 minutes later, Alex was sitting up in bed looking completely refreshed and somehow put together, despite having just woken up. "Good morning, roommate," she said cheerfully. "Sorry about the pillow situation. I'm apparently a very active sleeper." "I noticed," Jake said, trying to stretch out a kink in his neck. "Did you sleep at all?" Alex asked, looking genuinely concerned. "Some," Jake lied. Alex got out of bed and started making it with military precision, somehow managing to smooth out all the sheets and arrange the pillows perfectly in less than 2 minutes. Jake watched her work, impressed despite himself. "I'm going to take a quick shower," she announced. "Then I'll make us breakfast while we figure out our next move." Before Jake could respond, she had gathered some clothes and disappeared into the bathroom. A moment later, he heard the shower running and Alex singing something that sounded like an old jazz standard. Jake stood in his bedroom, looking around at space that somehow felt completely different than it had 24 hours ago. Alex's presence had changed something fundamental about the room. It felt more alive somehow, less like a museum and more like a place where people actually lived. 20 minutes later, Alex emerged from the bathroom wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair still damp. She looked comfortable and at home, like she'd been living there for months instead of hours. "Your turn," she said. "I left plenty of hot water." When Jake came out of the bathroom, he found Alex in the kitchen, somehow cooking what smelled like the best breakfast he'd ever experienced. She had found ingredients he'd forgotten he owned and was juggling 3 different pans like a professional chef. "How did you find all this stuff?" Jake asked, looking at eggs, bacon, and what appeared to be homemade pancakes. "You had everything," Alex said, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "You just had it scattered in different places. Eggs in the fridge, pancake mix in the back of the pantry, bacon hidden behind your frozen vegetables. I forgot I had pancake mix." "Most people do," Alex said. "It's like the forgotten stepchild of breakfast foods." She plated everything beautifully and set it on the table. Jake sat down and took a bite of the pancakes. They were incredible. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked. "My grandmother," Alex said. "She believed that if you were going to do something, you should do it well. That included making breakfast." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Jake couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real breakfast. Usually he grabbed a protein bar on his way out the door. "So," Alex said eventually, "what's our plan for today?" Jake looked at her across the table. She was watching him expectantly, like they were partners working on a project together. "I guess we need to track down Mr. Peterson," he said. "Agreed," Alex said. "I did some research while you were in the shower. The property management company he works for has some interesting reviews online. Lots of people complaining about disappearing landlords and rental scams." Jake felt his stomach drop. "You think we've been scammed?" "I think we need to be prepared for that possibility," Alex said gently. "But let's not panic until we know, for sure." She pulled out her phone and showed him a list of phone numbers and addresses. "I found 3 different numbers for Mr. Peterson, plus the main office for the property management company. We can spend the morning making calls and see what we find out." Jake looked at the list, then at Alex. She had somehow turned a disaster into a manageable situation with clear action steps. He was beginning to understand why she had handled everything so calmly. "You're really good at this," he said. "At what?" "Problem solving, taking charge, making the best of a bad situation." Alex smiled. "I've had practice. Life tends to throw curveballs, and you can either swing at them or let them knock you down." Jake realized he had been letting curveballs knock him down for most of his life. He played it safe, stuck to routines, avoided anything unpredictable. But here was Alex, faced with the same impossible situation, and she was making pancakes and solving problems like it was just another Tuesday. "All right," he said. "Let's make some calls and figure this out." Alex grinned and raised her coffee mug. To the strangest partnership ever formed. Jake clinked his mug against hers, wondering when he had started thinking of them as a team. By Wednesday morning, Jake and Alex had made 17 phone calls, sent 12 emails, and visited 2 different office buildings. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Mr. Peterson had vanished, and they weren't the only ones looking for him. "This is crazy," Jake said, hanging up his phone after yet another failed attempt to reach their landlord. "How does someone just disappear?" Alex was sitting at his kitchen table with her laptop open, typing furiously. She'd been doing research for the past 2 hours, and her expression had grown more serious with each website she visited. "Jake," she said slowly, "I think we need to sit down and have a real conversation about this situation." The tone in her voice made Jake's stomach clench. Over the past 3 days, Alex had been optimistic about everything. She had treated their weird roommate situation like an adventure, their missing landlord like a minor inconvenience. If Alex was worried, things were really bad. "What did you find?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. Alex turned her laptop around so he could see the screen. It was filled with news articles, forum posts, and complaint websites. Mr. Peterson works for a company called Metro Property Solutions. Or at least, he used to. Jake leaned forward to read the headlines. Company under investigation. Tenants left homeless after rental scam. Property management firm accused of taking money and running. Oh no, Jake whispered. It gets worse, Alex said. I found a forum where people are sharing their stories. There are at least 30 people who paid deposits and rent to Mr. Peterson in the past 2 months. Some of them showed up to apartments that were already occupied. Others found out the apartments didn't exist at all. Jake felt like the floor was dropping out from under him. So we're not just dealing with a room mix-up, we're dealing with a complete scam, Alex finished. And based on what I'm reading, Mr. Peterson and his company took the money and disappeared. The police are looking for them, but they could be anywhere by now. Jake stared at the laptop screen, trying to process what this meant. So the lease agreements we both signed are probably worthless, Alex said, and the money we both paid is probably gone. They sat in silence for a moment. Jake felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. Not only had he been scammed, but he was potentially about to lose his apartment. Where would he go? How would he find a new place? How? Would he afford new deposits when his money was gone? Alex must have seen the panic in his eyes because she reached across the table and put her hand on his arm. Hey, she said gently. We're going to figure this out. How? Jake asked. I don't have money for another apartment. All my savings went to Mr. Peterson. Same here, Alex said. But that doesn't mean we're stuck. She closed the laptop and looked at him directly. Jake, I have an idea, but you might think it's completely insane. At this point, I'm open to insane ideas. Alex took a deep breath. What if we just stayed here, together, as real roommates? Jake blinked. What do you mean? I mean, what if we figured out who actually owns this apartment and tried to work out a legitimate lease with them? Split the rent, split the utilities, split everything down the middle. Jake stared at her. You want to keep living together? Think about it, Alex said. This apartment is big enough for 2 people. We've been sharing space for 3 days and we haven't killed each other. We both need somewhere to live and we both lost money to the same scammer. She gestured around. The kitchen. Plus, let's be honest. The rent for this place split between 2 people would be way more affordable than either of us finding something on our own. Jake had to admit she had a point. His salary was decent, but rent in the city was expensive. Splitting costs would give him financial breathing room he hadn't had in years. But we barely know each other, he said. We know more about each other than most roommates do when they move in together, Alex pointed out. I know you're neat, quiet, and considerate. You know I can cook, I clean up after myself, and I don't party or bring strange people home. Jake thought about the past 3 days. Alex had been the ideal roommate in every way that mattered. She respected his space, contributed to household tasks, and somehow made his orderly life more interesting without making it chaotic. You're serious about this, he said. Dead serious, Alex replied. Jake, I don't know what's going to happen with the Mr. Peterson situation. Maybe we'll get our money back, maybe we won't. But I do know that we work well together and we're both in the same boat. She paused. Unless you hate the idea of living with me. I mean, I did kind of force myself into your life in a pretty dramatic way. Jake looked at her sitting across from him, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, her expression hopeful but trying not to be too pushy. 3 days ago, she had been a complete stranger who had turned his life upside down. Now he couldn't imagine his apartment without her morning singing in the shower, her incredible cooking, or her optimistic problem-solving approach to everything. I don't hate the idea, he said slowly. Alex's face lit up. Really? Really, Jake said, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. But we need to do this right. Legal lease, clear boundaries, everything official. Absolutely, Alex agreed. We find the real owner of this apartment, we negotiate fair terms, and we become legitimate roommates. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Excitement. About an uncertain future. Okay, he said. Let's do it. Alex grinned and pulled out her phone. Great. I already found the contact information for the actual property owner. Her name is Mrs. Williams, and she lives about 10 blocks from here. Jake stared at her. You already researched the real owner? I may have gotten a little ahead of myself, Alex admitted sheepishly. But I really hoped you'd say yes. 6 months later, Jake's life looked nothing like it had before Alex walked into his room that Tuesday evening. Their apartment was still organized, but now it had personality. Alex's photography covered the walls, her plants filled the windowsills, and her tendency to rearrange furniture meant the living room had a new layout every few weeks. The master bedroom had been transformed into a space that somehow perfectly balanced both of their styles. Jake's neat organization systems kept everything functional, while Alex's creative touches made it feel warm and lived in. They had replaced the pillow wall with a more practical solution. Jake had moved to the living room for exactly 1 week before they both admitted that arrangement was ridiculous. Mrs. Williams had turned out to be a kind older woman who was horrified to learn that her property manager had been running scams. She had immediately fired the property management company and worked out a fair lease directly with Jake and Alex. The rent was reasonable when split between 2 people, and Mrs. Williams appreciated having responsible tenants who took care of the place. The Mr. Peterson situation had eventually been resolved through the police investigation. Jake and Alex had gotten most of their money back, though the legal process had taken months. By then, they had already settled into their new routine and couldn't imagine living any other way. Jake's morning routine now included making coffee for 2 people and navigating around Alex's yoga practice in the living room. Instead of eating protein bars on his way to work, he sat down to actual breakfast every morning. Alex had taught him to cook simple things, and he had helped her create systems for keeping track of her photography business finances. Their friends loved the story of how they met. At parties, people would ask them to tell it again, and Jake would watch Alex's face light up as she described walking into his room that first night. She always made it sound like the most natural thing in the world, like she had known somehow that she was walking into her future home. The look on his face, Alex would say, laughing. I thought he was going to pass out right there in the doorway. I thought I was being robbed by the world's most confident burglar, Jake would add, which always got a laugh. But the real story, Jake knew, wasn't in that dramatic first meeting. The real story was in all the small moments that came after. The way Alex had turned his orderly morning routine into something he actually looked forward to. The way she had taught him that being spontaneous didn't mean being irresponsible. The way she had shown him that home wasn't just about having your own space, but about sharing that space with someone who made it better. Alex had changed too. Her restless energy had found focus in their shared life. She still traveled for photography projects, but now she had a home base that felt stable and permanent. She still rearranged furniture and tried new recipes, but now she had someone to share the results with. On quiet Sunday mornings, when they sat at the kitchen table reading different sections of the newspaper and sharing pieces of interesting articles, Jake would sometimes think about how close he had come to missing all of this. If Alex had been assigned to a different apartment, if the scammer had been more organized, if she had been less confident about proposing their roommate arrangement, his life would still be exactly what it had been 6 months ago. Safe, predictable, lonely. What are you thinking about? Alex asked one morning, looking up from an article about urban photography trends. Just how weird life is, Jake said. 6 months ago, the idea of sharing my space with anyone seemed impossible. Now I can't imagine living alone. Alex smiled. Funny how things work out. Is it working out, though? Jake asked. I mean, really. Are you happy with this arrangement? It was a question he had wanted to ask for weeks but had been afraid of the answer. What if Alex was just being polite? What if she was planning to move out as soon as she found something better? Alex set down her newspaper and looked at him seriously. Jake, this is the happiest I've ever been living anywhere. Really? Really, she said. I've lived in a lot of places with a lot of different people. Roommates who were slobs, roommates who were control freaks, roommates who threw parties every weekend, roommates who never spoke to me. She gestured around their sunny kitchen. This is the first place that's ever felt like home. Jake felt something warm settle in his chest. For me, too. Alex grinned. Good. Because I was thinking about asking Mrs. Williams if we could sign a longer lease. Maybe 2 years instead of 1. You want to stay here for 2 more years? I want to stay here as long as you'll have me, Alex said simply. Jake looked at her sitting across from him in the morning light, her hair messy from sleep, wearing one of his old college sweatshirts she had claimed as her own. 6 months ago, she had walked into his room completely uninvited and claimed his bed as hers. Now she was claiming something much bigger, a future together that neither of them had planned but both of them wanted. 2 years sounds good, Jake said, but let's make it 5. Alex's smile was brighter than the morning sun streaming through their kitchen window. Deal, roommate. Sometimes, Jake reflected, the best things in life arrived when you least expected them, changed everything you thought you wanted and turned out to be exactly what you needed all along.